Crescent Moon Chapter 1. The Day He Vanished. It was a warm summer evening when everything changed. The kind of evening when the air smells like fresh-cut grass and distant fireworks. Our neighborhood was alive with the sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting on porches. But for my family, that day would mark the start of a nightmare we never saw coming. My brother Jake was only 16 years old, full of life, energy, and dreams about the future. He was the kind of kid who could light up a room with his smile, always cracking jokes and pulling pranks. That day, he had been out riding his bike, racing down the streets with his friends, carefree as ever. I remember watching him from the window, laughing and shouting as he sped past our house. He waved, and I waved back, thinking nothing of it. That was the last time I saw him before he disappeared. Hours later, our lives flipped upside down. Jake never came home. At first, we thought he'd stayed over at a friend's house, or maybe lost track of time. But as the night dragged on, unease settled over us like a heavy fog. We called his friends. No one had seen him after the afternoon ride. We checked the nearby parks, the stores, the streets he loved. Nothing. My parents reported him missing the next morning. The police started searching. Flyers went up all over town. But days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. No sign of Jake. No clues. Just an empty space where he used to be. The hardest part was the silence. No calls. No messages. No explanations. Just a cold, aching void. Our family tried to keep hope alive. We hung on to memories. His laughter, his favorite songs, the way he always left his bike by the porch. But with each passing day, hope grew thinner. People whispered. Some said he ran away. Others feared something worse. We didn't know what to believe. For 10 years, Jake was a ghost in our lives, a missing piece that could never be found. But then, everything changed again. One evening, just as the sun was setting, the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there he was. He looked just like the boy I remembered. Same height, same messy brown hair, same familiar smile, though this time, it was faint, hesitant. He said his name was Jake. He said he'd been gone, and that he was home now. But something was different. The way he moved, the way he looked at us, the way he spoke. It was like meeting a stranger in a familiar face. And as I stood there, heart pounding, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Crescent Moon Chapter 2. The Stranger Wearing His Face. At first, we tried to ignore the subtle differences. Jake was back. That's all that mattered. The police had even run DNA tests to confirm it really was him. But the more time passed, the more those small cracks started to show. The way he moved was off. Jake had always been energetic, quick on his feet, bouncing from one thing to the next. But now, he moved slowly, deliberately, as if he was unsure of his own body. He didn't laugh like he used to. Not really. Sometimes he'd smile, but it felt forced, like he was practicing a role he'd forgotten how to play. At dinner one night, I asked about his favorite foods. Pizza, I suggested. He shook his head. Actually, I'm not very hungry. That was strange. Jake used to be the kid who'd eat 3 plates and ask for more. And then there were his eyes. They were the same color, green like mine and Dad's, but they seemed different. Distant, empty, like they were watching something no one else could see. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch him staring off into space, unblinking, lost in thought. When I asked what he was thinking about, he'd just shrug. His habits had changed too. He wouldn't play his old favorite songs. He stopped riding his bike. He didn't want to hang out with old friends. Instead, he spent hours alone in his room, sometimes muttering things we couldn't understand. One day, I found a notebook in his backpack. It was filled with strange symbols and drawings. Some looked like maps, others like codes. I asked him about it. He just looked at me with those hollow eyes and said, "I'm trying to remember." It was like Jake was fighting something inside him, something that had been buried for 10 years. And while we were relieved to have him back, we couldn't ignore the growing feeling that this wasn't the brother we once knew. That night, as I lay in bed, I wondered, who was Jake, really? And what had happened to him during those missing years? Crescent Moon Chapter 3. Unsettling signs. The days passed, but the feeling of unease grew heavier with every hour. Jake was home, yes, but the warmth we once shared was missing, replaced by cold distance. One afternoon, Mom found Jake standing in the backyard, staring at the old oak tree. It was the same tree where he used to climb and dream about the future. But now, he didn't move. He didn't smile. Just stood there, silent, almost like a statue. When she called his name, he didn't respond. Later, at dinner, things got even stranger. Dad tried to make conversation, asking Jake about school, friends, his plans. Jake's answers were vague. "I'm not sure," he said more than once. When Dad asked if he remembered anything from before he disappeared, Jake's eyes went blank. "I don't remember much," he said softly. That night, I overheard a conversation between my parents. "We need help," Mom whispered. "This isn't just a teenage phase. Something's wrong." Dad nodded slowly. "We should see a specialist. Someone who understands trauma. Or maybe something else." Meanwhile, Jake's behavior grew more unpredictable. Sometimes he would laugh, but it was wrong, hollow and forced. Other times, he'd get angry without reason, slamming doors or breaking things. Once, I caught him whispering to himself in a language none of us recognized. I decided to confront him. One afternoon, I sat beside him and said, "Jake, what happened to you? Where were you all these years?" He looked at me, really looked, but his eyes didn't seem to focus. "I was lost," he whispered. "I was somewhere else, trying to come back." The mystery deepened. What did somewhere else mean? Where was Jake during those missing years? And why did he feel like a stranger in his own skin? We knew we had to find answers, before the person we called brother disappeared again. Crescent Moon Chapter 4. Searching for Answers. After the strange behaviors grew impossible to ignore, my parents finally decided to take action. They contacted a specialist, a psychologist who dealt with trauma and missing persons cases. Dr. Harper was kind but serious. During our first meeting, she asked Jake questions that made him uncomfortable. He'd pause for a long time before answering, often saying, "I don't know," or "I'm not sure." Dr. Harper suggested that Jake might be suffering from severe dissociative amnesia, a condition where the mind blocks out traumatic memories. But as she dug deeper, something about Jake didn't fit the usual patterns. He didn't just forget. He acted like someone else. One day, Dr. Harper asked Jake to describe a memory from his childhood. He struggled at first, then suddenly spoke of a place he'd never been to, a strange house by a foggy lake. He described details none of us knew: a cracked window, a hidden door, the smell of pine needles. Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances. Meanwhile, strange things started happening around the house. Doors would creak open on their own. Lights flickered when Jake entered a room. And sometimes, late at night, we heard soft footsteps in the hallway, but no one was there. Jake began to spend more time alone in the basement, the one place he hadn't explored since coming back. He'd sit for hours, staring at the old boxes and forgotten things. One evening, I followed him down the creaky stairs. He was holding an old, tattered journal, its pages yellowed and fragile. When I asked him where it came from, he looked up with those strange eyes and said, "I found it here. It feels like it's mine, but I don't remember writing it." The journal was filled with entries, some in Jake's handwriting, others scribbled wildly, as if by someone else entirely. There were sketches of strange symbols, cryptic notes about crossing over, and warnings to stay away from the lake. As we read, a chilling thought took hold. Had Jake been somewhere more than just missing? Had he been trapped in a place between worlds? We were no longer sure who he really was, or if he was truly back at all. Crescent Moon Chapter 5. The Lake and the Locked Memories. The journal's warnings about the lake haunted us. Why would Jake, or whoever was inside him, mention something so specific? The next morning, my parents decided we had to visit the lake. It was a place on the edge of town, surrounded by thick forest and heavy fog almost year-round. A place kids dared each other to explore, but few really went to. When we arrived, the air was thick and cold despite the summer sun. The water was still, reflecting twisted branches and gray skies. Jake was silent the whole time, staring at the water as if it held the answers we needed. We walked the shoreline slowly, looking for anything unusual. That's when Jake stopped suddenly, pointing at a cluster of rocks near a small cave. "There," he said quietly. "That's where it started." We found a narrow opening leading into darkness. Inside, the air smelled damp and musty. My heart pounded as we shone our flashlights deeper into the cave. There, half buried in the mud, was a small wooden box. Inside the box, we found an old photograph, faded and torn at the edges. It was a picture of Jake, but not the Jake we knew. This one looked older, serious, with haunted eyes. On the back, a note was Crescent Moon Chapter 7, The Seance at the Lake. The night was heavy with tension as we gathered around a small fire by the lake, the cold air biting at our skin. Clara set up her equipment, strange devices with blinking lights and antennas that looked like something from another world. We all held hands, forming a circle. Clara spoke softly, guiding us through a meditation meant to open a bridge between our world and the one Jake was trapped in. At first, nothing happened. Then the air grew thick, like a fog settling around us. The fire flickered wildly, and Jake's eyes glazed over, distant and unfocused. Suddenly, a voice, soft, almost a whisper, echoed through the night. "Leave, before it's too late." Jake gasped and collapsed to his knees. We rushed to his side, but he seemed somewhere else, trapped between two worlds. Clara explained that what we were hearing was a warning, from whatever entity or force was holding Jake captive. She warned us not to underestimate the danger. As Jake slowly came back to himself, he revealed a terrifying detail. He wasn't alone in that other place. Something else was there, watching him, waiting. The more we learned, the clearer it became. Jake's disappearance wasn't just a mystery of a lost boy. It was a battle between two realities, one where Jake was alive and well, and another where something dark held him prisoner. That night by the lake marked the beginning of our true fight. We had to find a way to bring Jake back, fully and forever. Crescent Moon Chapter 8. The Risky Plan. After the seance at the lake, we knew things couldn't stay the same. Jake's struggle between two worlds was getting worse, and time was running out. Clara explained a risky option, a ritual to try and sever the connection that bound Jake to the other place. It was dangerous, she warned, and could backfire. But we were desperate. The ritual required a location where the boundary between worlds was thin, the lake itself. We would need to perform it at midnight, when the veil was thinnest. That week we prepared. We gathered old relics, candles, and the strange symbols from Jake's journal. Jake seemed nervous but willing. For the first time, he said he wanted to be free. The night of the ritual was cold and dark. We formed a circle near the water's edge, following Clara's instructions carefully. As she chanted the ancient words, the wind picked up, and the water rippled unnaturally. Suddenly, Jake screamed, a sound full of pain and fear. The air shimmered, and for a moment, we saw a shadowy figure lurking near the trees. Clara urged us to focus, to keep the circle unbroken. Slowly, the shadow faded, and Jake collapsed into my arms, trembling. When he looked up, his eyes were clearer, brighter. For the first time in years, Jake smiled genuinely. But as relief washed over us, Clara warned. This is only the beginning. The darkness might come back, stronger. We had won a battle, but the war for Jake's soul was far from over. Crescent Moon Chapter 9. Aftermath and Shadows. The days after the ritual were strangely peaceful. Jake seemed more himself, laughing, eating, even riding his bike again. For a moment, it felt like the nightmare was finally over. But the calm didn't last. One evening, I noticed Jake staring at the window, eyes wide and frozen, as if he saw something I couldn't. When I asked what was wrong, he whispered, "They're coming back." That night, strange noises echoed through the house. Soft footsteps, whispers in empty rooms. Doors slammed shut on their own. Our family grew tense and restless. Clara returned, her face grave. The darkness we pushed away is not gone. It's waiting, watching. She warned us to stay vigilant and told us to protect Jake with every ounce of strength we had. We installed locks, cameras, even salt lines around the house, anything to keep the shadows at bay. But Jake's sleep grew restless. He started talking in his sleep, mumbling about the other side, the Watchers, and the door. One night, I recorded his sleep-talking on my phone. Listening back, I heard a chilling confession. They want me back. They said I belonged to them. Fear gripped us all. Jake was caught between two worlds, and the darkness was coming for him. Our family was united like never before. We knew this battle would test every limit of love, courage, and hope. But we were ready to fight. For Jake, for our family, for the truth. Crescent Moon Chapter 10. The Final Confrontation. The air was thick with anticipation and fear. We knew the darkness wouldn't wait much longer to make its move. That night, Jake's sleep-talking grew urgent. They're here. The door is opening. We gathered in the living room, holding hands, ready for whatever was coming. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. A cold wind swept through the rooms, carrying whispers and distant screams. Jake began to convulse, caught in a battle we couldn't see. Clara guided us through a protective ritual, chanting words that felt ancient and powerful. The house trembled. Shadows swirled around Jake like a storm, trying to pull him away. But we held tight, our voices steady, our hearts full of hope. Slowly, the shadows weakened, retreating back into the darkness. Jake gasped and opened his eyes.